Hi everyone. Before we get into this audiobook, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button and drop a like. It helps me out a lot, as well as contributes a lot to the channel. Now, let's get into the story. I hope you enjoy Pine's sharp tang, mingled with the earthy musk of the forest floor, as Ilara stood at the clearing's edge, the moon a polished disk against the velvet sky. 8 years. An eternity had passed since the night her life fractured. She could still feel the clammy chill that crept through her threadbare boots, hear the bestial growls tearing the night's silence, see the spreading stain blooming like a dark rose on her father's tunic. Vagon. The name tasted like ash on her tongue, a constant echo of the Alpha who had stolen everything. Her grip tightened on the training blade lashed to her thigh. The elders spoke of absolution, of putting wounds to rest, of tribal unity, but forgiveness felt like spitting on her father's grave, a capitulation to the darkness that still stalked her subconscious. She had become a honed instrument, channeling grief and rage into a steel-hard determination. Someday, she would confront Vargan and exact her due. A hand rested on her shoulder, a reassuring weight. Kale. His eyes, liquid amber pools, reflected his concern. Ilara? Tonight isn't for solitude. She shrugged him off, though his touch usually offered a small solace. I'm all right, Kale. Just remembering things. He sighed, understanding etched on his face. He knew better than to breach the walls she'd erected around her spirit. Since that cataclysmic night, he had been steadfast, her guardian, her confidant. He deserved a love she couldn't summon. It's your birthday, he murmured, his voice tinged with yearning. Come back to the bonfire. They're waiting. Ilara nodded, summoning a smile. 21. A significant landmark, they insisted. A moment for celebration, for embracing life's possibilities. But her future stretched before her, a desolate expanse scarred by the past. The bonfire blazed in the heart of the gathering. Merriment and music surged through the air, a jarring contrast to the shadows coiled within her. Elder Rowan, his face a map of time and empathy, beckoned her forward. He held aloft a cup brimming with honey mead. To Ilara, may the year ahead bestow strength, serenity, and joy. The pack echoed his sentiment, their faces alight with warmth. Ilara raised her own cup, the sugary liquid failing to sweeten the bitterness within. She forced herself to weave through the crowd, to share laughter, to feign belonging. But she remained an outsider, forever marked by the wound Vargan had inflicted. As the evening progressed, the music intensified, the dancing became more animated. Kale lingered nearby, a silent anchor. He caught her gaze, offering a tentative, hopeful smile. She returned a wan one. He merited far more than she could offer. Abruptly, a sharp, searing pain tore through her core, stealing the air from her lungs. It felt like molten fire, searing her from the inside out. She gasped, clutching her stomach, her legs giving way. Ilara, Kale shouted, catching her as she collapsed. What is it? She couldn't answer. The agony too intense, too absolute. It pulsed through her veins, a relentless, agonizing rhythm. She looked around wildly, her vision blurring, seeking understanding. Elder Rowan pushed through the throng, his eyes widening with comprehension and dismay. He knelt beside Ilara, his hand trembling as he reached to touch her brow. The bond, he breathed, his voice barely audible above the revelry. It awakens. The mating bond. Every werewolf knew the lore, the tales of the inviolable connection uniting two souls. But it was rare, almost mythical, especially in times of strife and division. The pain surged, reaching a peak. Ilara cried out, her body racked with spasms. She felt a pull, an irresistible magnetic force drawing her towards something, someone. A scent, dark and compelling, flooded her senses. The scent of pine and burning wood, of damp earth and something primal, something lupine. Her eyes focused, locking onto a figure at the forest's edge, shrouded in gloom. He was imposing, broad-shouldered, his presence radiating dominance. Even in the dim light, recognition dawned. The silver gleam of his eyes, the stark angles of his face, the aura of brooding power that emanated from him. Vagan. A collective intake of breath rippled through the pack. The music faltered, the laughter stilled. Every gaze converged on the Alpha who had once been their adversary, now inextricably bound to one of their own. Ilara stared at him, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs, a maelstrom of horror and disbelief churning within her. This couldn't be real. It had to be some cruel jest, a waking nightmare. Vagan stepped forward, his expression unreadable as stone. He regarded her, not with hatred or triumph, but with something akin to recognition. The air thrummed with unseen energy, the raw power of the bond tethering them together, regardless of their past, irrespective of their animosity. "Ilara," he said, his voice a deep rumble that resonated deep within her. The pain crested, then began to ebb, leaving her drained and trembling. But the connection lingered, a tangible thread between them, impossible to sever. She looked at Kale, his face a canvas of shock and dismay. His eyes swam with hurt, and something else a spark of bitterness. She was bereft of words, of explanations. She had no agency in this. "No," she whispered, her voice raw. "This can't be." But it was. The mating bond had decreed it, binding her to the very man she had sworn to destroy. Her enemy, her destined. Silver Peak's shadow. The journey to Silver Peak was a blur of pain and muted terror. Ilara clung to consciousness, the mating bond a relentless tide pulling her toward the north. Bram, his face etched with concern, supported her weight as they crossed the border, the very air thickening with a palpable sense of power. The trees here were ancient, their branches gnarled and reaching like skeletal fingers, casting long, dancing shadows on the forest floor. It felt as though the land itself was judging her, weighing her worth. As they broke free of the dense woods, the sight of Silver Peak took Ilara's breath away, stealing it from her already aching lungs. It wasn't a village, not in the way she understood it. It was a fortress, carved into the side of a mountain, its stone walls rising seamlessly from the rock face. Watchtowers stood like silent sentinels, and the air hummed with the energy of 100 wolves, all alert, all wary. The scent of them, musky and territorial, assaulted her senses, making her stomach churn. They were met at the gates by Lyra, a warrior whose eyes were as sharp and cold as winter ice. Her stance was rigid, her hand resting on the hilt of the sword at her hip. "State your business," she commanded, her voice devoid of warmth. Bram stepped forward, his voice carefully neutral. "We seek Alpha Draven. Ilara of the Shadow Creek Pack requires his attention." Lyra's gaze swept over Ilara, lingering on her face, her torn clothes, her obvious distress. A flicker of something, curiosity, crossed her features, but it was quickly masked. "The Alpha's not expecting visitors, especially not from Shadow Creek." "He will see her," Bram insisted, his voice firm despite the undercurrent of anxiety. "It is imperative." Lyra hesitated, then nodded curtly. "Wait here." She disappeared into the fortress, leaving Ilara exposed to the scrutinizing gazes of the warriors who lined the walls. Each one of them radiated suspicion, hostility. She felt like a lamb being led to slaughter, the weight of their judgment pressing down on her. A small voice, clear and bright as a mountain stream, cut through the tension. "Is she going to be okay?" Ilara looked down to see a young girl, no older than 10, peering at her with wide, innocent eyes. Mara, Bram had called her on the gurney. She was small for her age, with a scattering of freckles across her nose and an earnest expression that tugged at Ilara's heart. "I'll be fine," Ilara managed, forcing a smile. Mara tilted her head, her brow furrowed. "You look like you're hurting." "I am," Ilara admitted, surprised by the honesty. "But I'll get through it." Lyra returned, her expression unchanged. "The Alpha will see you now. Bram, you will wait outside." Bram opened his mouth to protest, but Ilara stopped him with a hand on his arm. "It's all right, Bram. I can do this." She followed Lyra through the fortress, the rough stone floors echoing with the sound of their footsteps. The air grew colder, the shadows deeper, until they reached a massive oak door, carved with intricate designs of wolves and mountains. Lyra pushed it open, revealing a vast chamber, dominated by a roaring fireplace at one end and a large, imposing figure standing before it. Vargan. He was even more terrifying in person. Taller than she remembered, broader, his presence filled the room, suffocating her. His dark hair fell to his shoulders, framing a face that was both beautiful and brutal. His eyes, the color of a stormy sea, were fixed on her, burning with an intensity that made her want to cower. "Ilara," he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her very bones. She straightened her spine, trying to summon the hatred that had fueled her for so long, but it felt weak, diluted by the agonizing pull of the bond. "Vargan," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. He took a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "What brings you to my territory?" "You know why I'm here," she said, finding a sliver of defiance. "You felt it too, didn't you? The bond." A muscle twitched in his jaw. "I felt something. Something unwelcome." His words were like a slap in the face. Unwelcome? Was that all she was to him? A burden? An inconvenience? "You killed my father," she said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "You destroyed my life. And now you expect me to what? Embrace this mockery of a bond?" He stopped, his expression hardening. "Your father was a traitor. He attacked Silver Peak. He paid the price for his actions." "He was defending his pack," she cried. "He was protecting his people." "He was a fool," Vargan said, his voice cold and unforgiving. "And now you are here, in my home, bound to me by a force you clearly despise." "I will never accept this," Ilara vowed, her eyes blazing with hatred. "I will never be your Luna." Vargan's gaze intensified, his eyes locking onto hers with an unnerving intensity. His voice dropped, becoming a dangerous, intimate growl. "You have no choice." The dining hall felt like a maw of shadow, meager candlelight battling the gloom that clung to Silver Peak's very foundations. A massive oak table, its surface gleaming darkly, dominated the space, reflecting the fragile light. Ilara occupied one end, feeling insignificant against the backdrop of Vargan's might. Across from her, His expression remained an enigma, a carefully constructed facade of power. Tension thrummed in the air, thicker than the pungent scent of roasted game laid out before them. She toyed with the food, the savory meat turning to dust on her tongue. Every nerve screamed in rebellion, a chaotic orchestra driven by the unwanted connection. It tugged, it urged, demanding she see the wolf before her as something beyond an adversary. She suppressed the sensation, burying it beneath layers of animosity and grief. "Eat, Ilara," Vargan's voice resonated, a deep rumble. "You're too gaunt." The concern, however faint, chafed at her raw emotions. "Worried about my well-being, Vargan, after abducting me?" He sighed, a sound of weariness that seemed incongruous in such a commanding figure. "I acted as I must. The bonded it's transformative." "It transforms nothing," she retorted, her voice more biting than intended. "You murdered my father. You decimated my pack. All that remains between us is hatred." He leaned back, his gaze unwavering. "Your father was a fool. He was intransigent, blind to reason." "Reason?" Ilara's laugh was hollow, laced with bitterness. "Do you call the slaughter of innocents reason? Do you call seizing land that was ours for generations reason? For years your pack trespassed on our borders, Ilara. They plundered our resources, murdered our people. Your father's obstinate pride brought about your downfall." He paused, his eyes probing hers. "I offered him terms, more than once. He refused. He invited war." She stared, her heart hammering. Could it be true? Had her father's intransigence sealed their fate? The thought was a shard of ice, lodging itself in her soul, a seed of doubt taking root. "Lies," she breathed, shaking her head. "You're attempting to justify your barbarity, to paint yourself as the wronged party." "I owe you no justification, Ilara," he said, his tone hardening. "I am Alpha of Silver Peak. I answer to none." "Then why tell me this?" she challenged. Eyes narrowed. "Why attempt to sway me?" He hesitated, a fleeting, indecipherable flicker in his eyes. Because the bond shifts the paradigm. Whether you embrace it or not, we are linked now. We must discover a way to coexist, if not for ourselves, then for our people." "Coexist?" she scoffed. "You expect me to coexist with the wolf who butchered my kin? You expect me to forgive you?" "Forgiveness is a choice, Ilara," he replied softly. "One you may never be prepared to make. But comprehension is a beginning." She shoved her plate away, the food untouched. "I comprehend perfectly. You are a monster, Vargan, and I will never, under any circumstance, forgive you." She rose abruptly, the chair screeching against the flagstone floor. "I've lost my appetite. I need air." She fled the hall, the oppressive atmosphere suffocating her. She needed to escape the confinement, to inhale deeply, to discover some semblance of peace in this impossible situation. Outside, the night air was frigid and bracing, a welcome balm to the stifling heat within the fortress. Bram awaited her, his face creased with anxiety. "Ilara, are you all right? I sensed your distress." "I'm fine," she prevaricated, her voice trembling slightly. "Just overwhelmed." He scrutinized her face, concern etched in his features. "He's trying to manipulate you, isn't he?" She nodded, speechless. "Don't heed his words, Ilara," Bram urged, his voice fierce. "Don't let him burrow into your mind. Remember his actions. Remember your father." "I do," she affirmed, her voice regaining its resolve. "I will never let it fade." She gazed up at the imposing fortress, its somber silhouette stark against the celestial tapestry. This was her prison, her gilded cage, but she would not be undone. She would not submit. She would contrive a way to elude her captors, to avenge her father, to sever the connection that threatened to consume her. She refused to concede to fate. She would carve her own path, even if it meant being tempered by fire. Secrets in Stone Vargan's pronouncements weighed on Ilara, a suffocating weight. The memory of her father, not as the revered leader, but as a headstrong monarch whose pride led to ruin, haunted her waking moments. Sleep was no refuge, only delivering fragmented recollections and the nagging ache of the strengthening connection. Impelled by an urgent need for clarity, Ilara slipped from bed before sunrise. The Silver Peak Lodge slumbered, the air heavy with pine mingled with an element both feral and alluring, stirring something deep within her core. She navigated the unfamiliar hallways, her bare feet soundless against the smooth flagstones. Each chamber, in its opulence, served as a stark reminder of her confinement, each lavish detail a symbol of Vargan's dominion. She stumbled upon a previously unexplored area, the temperature dropping, the shadows deepening. Upon the far wall hung a tapestry illustrating a silver wolf locked in combat with a ferocious bear. Ilara extended a hand, her fingertips tracing the elaborate embroidery. As she did, a slight yielding met her touch. Pressing further, she located a concealed mechanism. With a subtle click, a portion of the wall pivoted inward, revealing a hidden corridor. A jolt of exhilaration coursed through her. This could be it, her opportunity to uncover something, anything, to aid in her escape, to sever the connection, to avenge her sire. The passage led to a circular chamber, its perimeter lined with soaring shelves laden with books. The atmosphere radiated the aroma of aged paper and treated leather. A clandestine library, sequestered from the rest of the lodge, a veiled repository of knowledge. Ilara entered, her eyes widening with wonder. An unexpected boon. This was promising. She trailed her fingers along the spines, deciphering titles in languages only partially familiar. Ancient chronicles of werewolf tradition, annals of the packs, dissertations on the mating bond. It was a veritable trove, and she resolved to unearth its secrets. The hours dissolved in a whirlwind of fervent investigation. Ilara absorbed every syllable, her hopes rising with each newfound clue, only to be dashed with each impasse. The mating bond, it appeared, was as time-worn and unyielding as the lunar cycle itself. There were rumors of rituals, of forbidden practices, but nothing substantial, nothing offering a definitive solution. Irritation festered within her. Was she fated to be inextricably linked to Vargan? Was there no absolution from this perverted destiny? Searching for something? Ilara spun around, jolted. Bram stood framed in the doorway, his countenance marked with concern. "This is incredible," she breathed, gesturing towards the library. "I had no idea this existed." "Few do," Bram responded, stepping into the room. "It's Vargan's personal collection. He inherited it from his predecessor." "I'm looking for a way out," Ilara admitted, her voice barely audible. "A means to break the bond." Bram's features softened. "I understand," he replied. "Believe me, I do." "Do you?" Ilara challenged, suspicion narrowing her gaze. Or are you merely another devoted servant of Vargon's court? Bram hesitated, then shook his head. My loyalty is to the pack, he stated. However, I harbor reservations about Vargon, about the path he's steering us down. Reservations? Ilara seized upon the word. What sort of reservations? Bram glanced around, as if fearing eavesdroppers. He's transformed, he confided, his voice hushed. Since the conflict, he's become unyielding. He disregards counsel. He simply acts upon what he believes is paramount, irrespective of the repercussions. And you disapprove of his actions? Not consistently, Bram conceded. Your father, the fate of your pack, it was unjust. Ilara fixed her gaze upon him, her pulse quickening. Then why assist him? I attempt to, Bram responded. I endeavor to guide him, to appeal to his reason. But it's proving increasingly difficult. And now with the bond I fear for your well-being, Ilara. Fear for me? Ilara scoffed. I require no pity. It's not commiseration, Bram clarified. It's concern. Vargon possesses immense power, but he is also perilous. He is capable of drastic measures, particularly when safeguarding what he deems his own. And he deems me his? Ilara queried, her voice trembling. Bram nodded. The bonded alters perspectives. It renders him protective. Then I must dissolve it, Ilara avowed, her voice resonating with resolve. I must discover a means of escape before it is too late. I offer my assistance, Bram proposed. My familiarity with this library surpasses all save Vargon himself. I can expedite your search. Ilara hesitated. Could she place her trust in him? Was this a deception? Yet she detected sincerity in his eyes, authentic concern in his tone. She had little to forfeit. Very well, she conceded. Help me. Together, they resumed their exploration, poring over archaic texts and overlooked scrolls. The library morphed into their sanctuary, a haven where they could confide their uncertainties, their anxieties, their aspirations. Ilara discovered herself drawn to Bram's steadfast resolve, his unwavering fidelity, his astonishing insight into the pack's heritage. He was an improbable confederate, yet he was her sole recourse. As the days blurred into nights, the connection between Ilara and Vargon grew tighter, a perpetual reminder of her subjugation. But with Bram at her side, she refused despair. She would unearth a means to break free, to avenge her father's demise, to reclaim her destiny. She would not be enchained to the beast who had shattered her world. Courting the enemy dawn brought the first offering. A comb of silver latticework studded with moonstones, deposited on the table by her window. Ilara lifted it, the frigid metal a sharp contrast to the inferno raging within. A pretty bauble, intended to soothe, to beguile. It felt like a gilded trap, whispering false promises. She flung it at the wall, the moonstones erupting like a constellation of shattered hopes. Later, a tapestry materialized within her chambers. Woven with deep sapphire and verdant threads, it depicted the Silver Peak Mountains, their summits frosted with what appeared to be genuine, shimmering ice crystals. It was breathtaking, a testament to artistry, and brought her perilously close to tears. Not admiration, but the stark reminder of her losses, of the homeland Vargon had plundered. She tore it from the wall. The luxurious fabric ripped with a gratifying sound, leaving it crumpled on the floor for the servants to discover. Vargon remained unseen. His tributes, his silent entreaties, were those of a predator gauging his quarry. Ilara felt like a cornered she-wolf, teeth bared and desperate, yet inextricably bound. That evening, lost in ancient scrolls alongside Bram in the library, a messenger Bra arrived. He bowed low, eyes fixed on the floor. Alpha Vargan requests your presence in the Great Hall, Luna. The title was a brand, seared into her very being. Her fists clenched, nails etching crescents into her palms. Tell him I am engaged. Bram, ever the cautious adviser, touched her arm. Ilara, perhaps you should consider. Consider what, Bram? She spat, her tone dripping with acid. Playing the submissive mate while he parades me as a spoil of war? Forgetting he butchered my father? Bram flinched, his usual composure fractured. That is not my meaning. But Vargan, he lacks patience. Discretion might be prudent. She knew the truth of his words, yet the thought of kowtowing to Vargan, of even acknowledging his attempts to what? Woo her? It curdled her blood. Still, Bran's safety was paramount. Very well, she conceded, her voice taut. Inform him I will attend. Torches blazed in the great hall, the air heavy with roasting game and the scent of pine. Vargan occupied his elevated dais, encircled by his beta and gamma. He epitomized the alpha, potent, commanding, and utterly divorced from the chaos he'd sown in her existence. He rose as she approached, his gaze, unwavering as always, locked on hers. Ilara, he greeted, his voice a resonant timbre that reverberated through the chamber. I am gratified by your presence. She offered a stiff nod, refusing to sustain his gaze. The hall teemed with wolves, their eyes dissecting her. She felt exposed, vulnerable beneath their scrutiny. I have been contemplating, Vargan continued, his tone smooth as honed steel, the matter of your integration within the pack. Integration? She nearly scoffed. Assimilation more like it. I seek no integration, she stated, her voice clear and frigid. Vargan's eyes narrowed subtly, yet his composure remained unbroken. Nonetheless, he countered, your status as Luna necessitates certain obligations. I propose you accept a seat on the War Council. A collective gasp swept through the hall. A human on the War Council? Unthinkable. She met Vargan's gaze, attempting to decipher his agenda. Was this another trial? A further extension of his dominion? I am no warrior, she murmured, her voice barely audible. I possess no knowledge of strategy or conflict. You are astute, resourceful, and uniquely insightful, Vargan parried. Your perspective would be invaluable. She didn't believe a word. He was playing a game, and she wouldn't be his pawn. I decline, she stated, her voice unwavering. Vargan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, yet he merely nodded. As you wish, he replied, his voice laced with menace, but I trust you will reconsider. Your place is here, Ilara, by my side. She turned and departed, the weight of his words an oppressive burden. Her place was not here. Her place was anywhere but in his presence. Returning to her chambers, she paced restlessly, Vargan's visage branded into her mind's eye. He sought to ensnare her, not merely with gifts, but with authority. He sought to erase her animosity, her thirst for retribution. She sank to her knees, the frigid flagstones numbing her skin. What was happening to her? The mating bond was a venom, coursing through her, blurring the demarcation between hatred and something else, something she refused to acknowledge. She recalled her father, his benevolent gaze and gentle smile. She recalled the life Vargan had deprived him of, deprived her of, and animosity swelled once more, a scalding deluge poised to engulf her. She would not yield. She would not be seduced. She would not forget. She would avenge her father, even at the cost of her own life, even if it meant her own destruction. Yet as she lay in bed that night, Vargan's face haunted her dreams, and she couldn't quell the burgeoning fear that, perhaps, she was already lost, that the monster had already laid claim to her soul. Blood moon rising a metallic tang, sharp as shattered glass, rode the wind alongside the resinous scent of pine, a somber herald of the blood moon clan's growing belligerence. Ilara tasted it, a bitter sediment coating her tongue. It wasn't merely the feral musk of wolves, it was the ghost of spilled blood, the anticipatory ache of violence. Border skirmishes had become an almost nightly ritual, brief, savage ballets performed in the twilight woods, each leaving an indelible scar on the land and a festering unease within the pack. She stood on the balcony of her suite, the term feeling oddly extravagant given the circumstances. Below, the courtyard throbbed with martial energy. Wolves honed their claws against whetstones, each movement a study in lethal efficiency. Others engaged in brutal sparring matches, the impact of bodies on the hard-packed earth a relentless percussion. Vargan weaved through them, a silent sentinel, his obsidian eyes assessing, calibrating. He seemed to drink in the nervous energy, transmuting it into a palpable sense of resolve that fortified his pack. Bram materialized at her side, his brow furrowed with concern. "My Luna," he began, his voice a hushed tremor. "The blood moon wolves grow ever bolder. Alpha Theron, he probes our defenses with alarming frequency." Ilara turned, her gaze hardening into flint. Theron. She spat the name like a curse. The name was synonymous with malice. Every pack knew of Theron. Tales of his brutality and ambition were carried on the wind. He was a predator draped in ruthlessness, his thirst for dominance insatiable. "Vargan convenes a war council this evening," Bram continued, his gaze darting nervously towards the activity below. "He has summoned his strategists. Prudence dictates you remain within the stronghold's protection." Ilara scoffed, the sound devoid of humor. "Prudence? Do you truly believe I should cower while my bondmate prepares for war?" The word bondmate felt like a betrayal, a capitulation she couldn't stomach. Bram recoiled, but held his ground. "My Luna, you remain unsettled. The pack fears your animosity towards Alpha Vargan may prove a vulnerability." "A vulnerability?" Ilara's voice sharpened, laced with indignation. "I am no liability. I am a warrior. Though I despise Vargan for his actions, I am not witless. I would never jeopardize my pack." The deception left a bitter taste. She would endanger Vargan, relish the opportunity to avenge her father. But the Packy, they were innocent, pawns in her personal game of vengeance. "I will attend the war council," she declared, broking no argument. "While I may disagree with Vargan, I deserve to be informed. And perhaps," she added, a sliver of steel in her tone, "I can offer a perspective he overlooks." The War Council convened within the pack's central hall, a cavernous space hewn from the bedrock. Torches cast elongated, swaying shadows across the walls, illuminating the faces of Vargan's inner circle. The air hung thick with apprehension, an almost tangible sense of impending doom. Vargan occupied the head of a long, scarred table, his expression a rigid mask. Authority and power seemed to emanate from him in waves. He looked every inch the Alpha, the executioner of her father. As Ilara entered, a silence descended, immediate and profound. Every eye turned to her, a complex blend of curiosity, resentment, and trepidation swirling within their depths. Vargan's gaze locked with hers, a fleeting, indecipherable flicker in his dark eyes. He offered no greeting, no acknowledgement, yet the atmosphere crackled with unspoken antagonism. He redirected his attention to the table, his voice a low, resonant command. Theron's incursions escalate. He probes our defenses, searching for a breach. We can no longer ignore this. We prepare for war. A ripple of unrest stirred through the room. An advisor, a battle-scarred veteran with grizzled fur, spoke. Alpha, Theron is a fearsome adversary. His pack outnumbers ours, and his warriors are renowned for their savagery. Savagery is not strength, Vargan retorted, his voice cutting. It is a failing. It renders them predictable. We will exploit their aggression. We will draw them into our territory, where we hold the advantage. We will fight on our terms. He unfurled a detailed map of the Silver Peak territory. He indicated a narrow defile, bordered by sheer cliffs. Here we make our stand. The Blood Moon wolves must funnel through this pass, negating their superior numbers. We will ambush them from the heights, utilizing the terrain to our benefit. Ilara watched, a reluctant admiration stirring within her. Vargan was not merely a brute. He was a strategist, a tactician with a keen and calculating mind. He spoke with unwavering confidence, igniting his pack spirit. As the council progressed, Ilara listened attentively, offering her insights when appropriate. She knew the Silver Peak territory like the back of her hand, every hidden path, every advantageous point. She highlighted flaws in Vargan's strategy, proposed alternate maneuvers, her voice clear and decisive. To her astonishment, Vargan listened, considering her suggestions with thoughtful deliberation. He did not dismiss her, did not treat her as an interloper. Theron's name surfaced, a grim motif woven through tales of scorched earth and brutal conquests, hints of his ambitions to annex Silver Peak and obliterate all opposition. He was painted as a menacing shadow looming on the periphery, a tempest gathering force. For the first time since arriving at Silver Peak, Ilara felt a sense of purpose, a flicker of belonging. She remained Vargan's captive, bound by the mating bond, yet she was also a member of the pack, a warrior prepared to defend her home. The lines between hatred and loyalty blurred, creating a disquieting, confusing turmoil within her. The blood moon ascended, and with it, a maelstrom of conflict and emotion threatened to engulf her. A Luna's insight, the war room air vibrated with unspoken anxieties, a weight palpable against the fur and hides of the assembled pack. Spread across the long battle-scarred table lay the maps, their details picked out by the nervous dance of torchlight on the faces surrounding them. Vargan dominated the head, an aura of contained might radiating from him, a fact even Ilara couldn't dismiss. His pronouncements on troop deployments, supply caches, and likely avenues of assault rolled out in a deep baritone that resonated within the chamber. Ilara hugged the periphery, striving for invisibility. Bram, before joining the warriors, had flashed her a look laden with concern, a silent entreaty to avoid entanglement. "Just be careful," he'd breathed, his worry a sharp contrast to the palpable animosity emanating from the others present. Lyra, a sentinel at the doorway, surveyed the room with frigid vigilance, her gaze pausing on Ilara with undisguised suspicion. The tactical plans hinged on Silver Peak's intimate knowledge of the terrain and the predictably brutal tactics of the Blood Moon clan. Yet, a discordant note resonated within Ilara. As she listened, She wrestled with her animosity for Vargon, struggling to reconcile it with the reality that these were now her people, their fate interwoven with the choices being made here. "We will contest the Western Pass," Vargon stated, his finger tracing a line on the parchment. "It offers the most direct access, and they will anticipate our defense there," a rough voice cut in. "But, Alpha, that exposes the southern approach. A flanking maneuver is inevitable. We lack the numbers to adequately secure both," Vargon retorted, his tone edged with steel. "The pass will be our bastion, our strength, our shield." Ilara gnawed her lip, a cold dread pooling in her gut. The southern approach, she knew that terrain intimately. Her childhood had been spent exploring those woods, hunting alongside her father, learning every contour, every concealed hollow. It wasn't simply exposed, it was virtually unguarded. A memory surfaced. Her father, imparting lessons on tracking, his voice brimming with pride as she mastered the art of concealment. He'd always emphasized the vital importance of knowing the landscape, of deciphering its secrets. Now, that knowledge stirred within her, a potential advantage that could tip the scales. She hesitated. To voice her thoughts would necessitate betraying her oath to dismantle Vargon, acknowledging his leadership, and aligning herself with a pack that viewed her with distrust. Could she, however, passively observe a potentially devastating error unfold? A deep inhalation steadied her as she detached herself from the wall and stepped into the circle. Every head swiveled in her direction, their expressions a tapestry of astonishment and hostility. Vargon's face remained an enigma, his eyes narrowed as he tracked her progress. "With all due respect, Alpha," Ilara began, her voice surprisingly firm, "I believe exclusive focus on the Western Pass is a grave miscalculation." A low murmur swept through the room. A scornful voice scoffed. What knowledge of warfare could a she-wolf possess? Ilara disregarded the insult, her gaze locked on Vargon. "The southern approach is more than just a trail. It's a labyrinth of interconnected pathways, veiled by dense undergrowth and treacherous footing. The Bloodmoon clan could circumvent the pass with ease and strike at our core." Vargon maintained his silence, his gaze unwavering as he assessed her. "And what alternative do you propose?" "A conventional defense is impossible," Ilara countered, her mind spinning. "But we can exploit the terrain, create illusory forces, deploy traps, channel them into constrictions where our reduced numbers can prevail. Convince them the approach is a heavily fortified gauntlet." She painted a vivid word picture of the southern approach, highlighting key features on the map, recalling the hidden ravines, the impenetrable thickets, the natural bottlenecks. Her words unveiled the strategic potential of the route, revealing its potential in a light no one had yet considered. A hushed stillness descended upon the room as she spoke, and even her harshest critics seemed captivated. Bram watched, caught between pride and anxiety, his eyes wide with shock. When she concluded, the silence lingered, punctuated only by the crackle of the torches. Finally, Vargon spoke, his voice devoid of inflection. "You possess an intimate knowledge of this land." It was not an affirmation, nor was it a rejection. It was an acknowledgement of her familiarity. "I was raised there," Ilara responded simply. "Can your strategy prove effective?" another warrior queried, his voice laced with skepticism. "It can afford us time," Ilara replied. "Time to reinforce the pass, time to prepare for the onslaught. It will not secure victory, but it might preserve lives." Vargon advanced toward the map, his gaze sweeping over the southern approach, tracing the pathways Ilara had described. "Indicate where you would position these diversions," he directed, his voice a low rumble. Ilara leaned over the map, pinpointing specific locations, elucidating her reasoning, her movements mirroring Vargan's. The other pack members observed them, their countenances a blend of confusion and grudging admiration. For the first time since arriving at Silver Peak, Ilara experienced a flicker of something beyond mere animosity, a sense of purpose, a connection to the pack. But the feeling was ephemeral, swiftly eclipsed by the realization that she was aiding the man who had murdered her father, that she was deploying her knowledge to safeguard his pack, his people. As the War Council proceeded, Ilara found herself integrated into the discourse, her insights proving invaluable. She was no longer simply a prisoner, a pawn in Vargan's game. She was a strategist, a protector, a Luna, a role she never desired, a destiny she desperately sought to outrun. Border ambushed the air hung thick with the scent of pine and damp earth as Vargan led the way, his broad shoulders cutting a path through the dense undergrowth. Ilara followed, trying to ignore the way her senses sharpened with every step closer to the Silver Peak border. It was a forced march alongside the man who haunted her dreams, the man whose presence both repulsed and intrigued her. She shoved the traitorous thought down, focusing on the task at hand. Her knowledge of the terrain, gleaned from childhood wanderings, was their best defense against a surprise attack. "Stay close," Vargan rumbled, his voice a low vibration against the stillness of the forest. He didn't look at her, his gaze fixed on the trees ahead, but she felt the weight of his command nonetheless. It wasn't an order, not exactly. More like concern? The idea was absurd. "I'm hardly going to wander off and get myself killed," she retorted, a defensive edge to her tone. He stopped abruptly, turning to face her. His eyes, usually the color of a stormy sea, were now clouded with something she couldn't decipher. "That's precisely what I'm worried about," Ilara scoffed, crossing her arms. "Don't pretend you care about my well-being, Vargan. We both know the only reason I'm here is because I have information you need." A muscle ticked in his jaw. "That's not true, Ilara. Not entirely." He hesitated, as if searching for the right words. "You're one of us now, whether you like it or not, and I protect my pack." The words stung, a bitter reminder of her unwanted bond. "I'm not one of you," she spat. "I'm a prisoner, nothing more." Before Vargan could reply, a twig snapped nearby. It was too loud, too deliberate. He tensed, his senses instantly on high alert. "Ambush," he growled, shoving Ilara behind him. "Get down!" Wolves erupted from the trees, their snarls echoing through the forest. Blood moon wolves. Their eyes burned with a savage hunger, their teeth bared in a terrifying display of aggression. Vargan shifted, his own wolf form emerging with a roar that shook the ground. He lunged forward, meeting the first attacker head-on, a blur of fur and teeth. Ilara scrambled for cover behind a thick oak, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had never witnessed such raw, primal violence before. It was brutal, terrifying, and strangely exhilarating. She watched, paralyzed, as Vargan fought with a ferocity she hadn't imagined, tearing through the Blood Moon ranks with ruthless efficiency. But they were outnumbered. One of the wolves, larger and more cunning than the others, broke away from the fray and charged towards Ilara. She gasped, instinctively reaching for the dagger hidden beneath her tunic. But before she could draw it, a surge of energy coursed through her veins, a wild, untamed power she had never felt before. Her vision blurred, her bones shifted, and a primal scream tore from her throat. She was changing, her hands and feet elongated, claws sprouting from her fingertips. Fur sprouted across her skin, her teeth sharpened into fangs. She was a wolf. The blood moon wolf faltered, momentarily stunned by her transformation. Ilara, fueled by adrenaline and a surge of instinct, lunged at him, her own snarl matching his. She was no match for Vargon, not yet, but she was a force to be reckoned with. They fought, a whirlwind of claws and teeth, until she finally managed to knock him off balance and pin him to the ground. She was about to deliver the killing blow when a voice stopped her. "Ilara, stand down." It was Vargon, his voice strained but commanding. He was wounded, a deep gash across his flank, but he was still fighting, holding off the remaining blood moon wolves. She hesitated, her instincts screaming for blood, but Vargon's voice cut through the haze. With a growl of frustration, she released the blood moon wolf and shifted back, collapsing to the ground, exhausted and disoriented. Vargon dispatched the last of their attackers, his eyes never leaving Ilara. He approached her cautiously, his wolf form receding as he shifted back to his human self. He was naked, bleeding, and utterly magnificent. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice rough with concern. Ilara stared at her hands, still trembling from the transformation. What was that?" "Your wolf," Vargon said, kneeling beside her. "It's finally awakened." He reached out to touch her, but she flinched away. "Don't," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Don't touch me." He withdrew his hand, his expression unreadable. "You saved my life, Ilara." "I didn't do it for you," she said, her voice regaining its strength. "I did it to protect myself." Vargon didn't reply, but she saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes. He knew she was lying. A horn blared in the distance, signaling that reinforcements were on their way. Vargon stood up, his gaze sweeping the forest. "We need to get back to Silver Peak, now." He offered her his hand, and for a moment she hesitated. Trusting Vargon was a dangerous game, but as she looked into his eyes, she saw something else there, a flicker of gratitude. Was it possible that the monster she had vowed to destroy was starting to see her as something more than just a prisoner? The campfire sputtered, a defiant orange bloom against the encroaching obsidian of the woods. Ilara, still thrumming with the echo of her recent shift, kept her distance from Vargon. The firelight danced across his face as he tended a long, raw laceration along his forearm. His movements were curt, efficient, belying the evident agony. She'd seen enough wounds to know. "Let me," she rasped, her voice a rusty hinge. He stilled, his gaze questioning, hesitant, but he offered no argument, merely extended his injured limb. Kneeling beside him, Ilara took his arm, a spark of unwanted awareness flaring at the contact. He winced almost imperceptibly. She ignored it, her focus narrowing on the gash, a clean strike, the mark of a honed blade, not a wild beast. Retrieving a dampened cloth from her pack, she began to cleanse the blood. "You shouldn't have," he murmured, his voice a low rumble. "Shouldn't have what, precisely?" she countered, eyes glued to her task. "Transformed. It was a needless risk. You could have died. As could you," she shot back, a touch too sharply. A beat of silence. "I'm accustomed to it." The words hung, freighted with unspoken history. Ilara pressed harder, the subtle aggression masked as concern. "Well, I'm decidedly not." She finished cleansing the wound, then mashed lavender and chamomile into a fragrant balm. Spreading the poultice, she secured it with a strip of linen, avoiding his intense scrutiny. "That should ease the ache." A clipped nod was his only reply, his eyes still pinned on her. "Thank you." The silence deepened, heavy and awkward. Ilara focused on her own scrapes and contusions, remnants of the fray. She attempted to ignore the weight of his stare, the way it seemed to prickle her skin, mapping every inch. "You changed," he finally said, breaking the quiet. During the fighting, Ilara understood. The unleashed power, the predatory grace, the takeover of pure instinct. It had been both intoxicating and chilling. "It was survival," she stated, clinging to her self-deception. His eyes, however, held unconvinced skepticism. He knew the truth. She met his gaze head-on. "What?" she challenged, her tone sharp. He reached out, his fingertip tracing a feather-light path along her cheek. The tentative touch sent another shiver through her. She fought the urge to recoil. "You saved me," he confessed softly. The words landed like a blow. Gratitude. He offered gratitude. To the woman who had spared the man who murdered her father. The irony was almost laughable. She jerked away from his touch. "Don't," she choked out, voice trembling. He withdrew his hand, expression veiled. Turning away, he fixed his gaze on the heart of the fire. "There's something I need to show you." He reached for the neckline of his tunic, pulling it aside to expose his chest. Ilara's breath hitched. His torso was a testament to battles past, an intricate tapestry of healed scars. But one stood out, a raw, jagged rent bisecting his shoulder and ribs. It was fresher, uglier than the others. "This," he said, his finger a somber guide along the scar, "is from the battle where I killed your father." The words struck with the force of a physical assault. She stared, mind spiraling. A brand, a permanent emblem of his transgression. Nausea surged, chased by a tidal wave of rage. She yearned to scream, to strike, to obliterate him, but she was paralyzed, trapped in the labyrinth of her own conflicting emotions. "I didn't want to," he continued, his voice a threadbare whisper. "He left me no other choice." Ilara longed to scream that it was a lie, but the sounds died in her throat. She searched his eyes, desperate for any sign of deceit, a flicker of repentance. She found only pain, a profound, echoing grief that mirrored her own. The fire popped and hissed, the only sound slicing through the oppressive quiet. "Why are you telling me this?" she finally managed, her voice ragged. He met her gaze, his eyes brimming with an anguish she couldn't begin to comprehend. "Because you deserve the truth. All of it." Ilara was adrift. She didn't know what to believe, what to feel, caught between visceral hatred and a disconcerting, unwelcome flicker of understanding. Vengeance wrestled with something else, something she wouldn't allow herself to name. Turning away, she stared into the fathomless darkness of the woods. The forest held its breath, but within her a tempest raged. The scars of the past ran deeper, burned hotter than any mere wound, and they threatened to unravel her completely. Protect her in secret, the coppery tang of blood, a blend of their scents, saturated the chamber. Ilara tended to the rent in Vargan's flank, the damaged tissue responding slowly to her ministrations. A muscle pulsed beneath her fingertips with each pass of the dampened cloth. Her hands trembled, a lingering echo of the wild shift, but also from the potent current that thrummed between them, raising gooseflesh along her arms. Vargan's gaze remained fixed upon her, his expression obscured by shadow and pain, perhaps even a sliver of yearning. "Why?" she rasped, the question cutting through the stillness. "Why reveal the scar?" Vargan shifted, a grimace flickering across his face. "You deserved the truth," he rumbled, his voice thick with suppressed pain. "I should have spoken of it before now." Ilara flinched, the cloth tumbling to the floor. The truth is you murdered my father." A fleeting shadow crossed his features, akin to remorse. "Yes," he conceded, "but it wasn't without cause." "Without cause?" Incredulity sharpened her tone. "He defended our land, our people." "And we, ours," Vargan countered, his eyes hardening. "Your father, he refused to yield. He left me no choice." Ilara's stare burned into him, a tempest gathering within. He spoke of strategy, of regrettable necessity. But he spoke of her father's life. The man who taught her the secrets of their kind, forged her into a warrior. "Get out," she choked out, her voice vibrating with contained rage. "Just to leave." Vargan offered no argument, rising with deliberate slowness and pivoting towards the exit. At the threshold, he paused, his broad back to her. "Ilara," he murmured, his voice barely a breath. "I understand if you cannot find forgiveness within yourself, but know this. My protection will always be yours." He departed, abandoning Ilara to the turmoil raging inside her. She felt crushed by the weight of their bond, the ceaseless war, the devastating truth and the unnerving possibility that Vargan was not the monster she had always envisioned. A hesitant knock shattered the silence. Bram entered, concern etched on his brow. He had witnessed the aftermath of the skirmish, the palpable tension strung between Ilara and Vargan. He read the storm in her eyes. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice gentle as a summer breeze. Ilara shook her head, unable to voice the chaos within. "I don't know what to believe anymore, Bram," she confessed, her voice thick. "Everything I held true, it's dissolving." She recounted the exchange with Vargan. The scar, the confession, the infuriating hint of justification. Bram listened in silence, his face impassive. "He swore to protect me," Ilara concluded, a mirthless chuckle escaping her lips. "The very man who extinguished my father's flame." Bram closed the distance between them, a comforting hand finding her shoulder. "Ilara," he said softly, "there are shadows you haven't seen." He hesitated, measuring his words. "Vargan has Benet safeguarding your former pack." Ilara stared, utterly taken aback. "Safeguarding them? From what?" "From Theron," Bram clarified. "Since hostilities began, Theron has been trying to swallow your pack's lands, absorbing them into his own. Vargan has subtly intervened, dispatching patrols, diverting Theron's hungry gaze." The revelation resonated within Ilara, shaking her to her core. It defied logic. Why would Vargan, the alpha of the pack that claimed her father's life, shield her people? It contradicted everything she believed about him. The conflict, the world. "How do you know this?" she whispered. "I have sources," Bram replied carefully. He was a master of shadows, a whisper catcher, invaluable to Vargan's strategies. He knew secrets others could only guess at. "Trust me, Ilara. Vargan has ensured their continued existence. He could have easily let Theron claim them, but he chose not to." The truth crashed over Ilara, a tidal wave of confusion. It tangled her already knotted emotions. Could she reconcile the image of the ruthless Alpha with the unexpected protector? Could Vargan be more than just a heartless savage? "Why?" she asked, her voice threaded with confusion and a fragile hope. "Why would he do that?" Bram sighed, the sound heavy with unspoken burdens. That, Ilara, is a question only he can answer. But proceed with caution, he warned, his eyes dark with concern. This Wara, it reshapes us all. Don't let it steal your heart. Bram melted back into the shadows, leaving Ilara to her solitude. The weight of his words settled heavily upon her. She gazed out at the darkening sky, the roiling clouds mirroring the tempest within. A battle waged between the thirst for vengeance and the burgeoning, unsettling possibility of understanding. The path ahead remained shrouded in mist, fraught with peril and fraught choices. But one truth shone clear. Ilara's odyssey had only just begun. Forging alliances, the stiffness in Ilara's limbs was a constant reminder of the wild, uncontrolled shift. She pushed past it, forcing her body to obey as she stepped into the training grounds. The air hung crisp and cool, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. Warriors moved with practiced grace, their movements a blur of controlled power. Lyra, ever watchful, stood near the edge of the training circle, her gaze sharp and unwavering. Ilara ignored her, focusing instead on the instructor, a grizzled warrior named Ronan. His eyes, though aged, held a spark of intensity that commanded respect. Today, we focus on control, Ronan's voice boomed across the grounds. Control of your wolf, control of your anger, control of your instincts. He looked directly at Ilara, a silent challenge in his gaze. Show me what you've learned. Ilara stepped forward, choosing a training dummy as her target. Closing her eyes, she reached for the wolf within, letting the familiar power surge through her veins. She shifted, the transformation fluid and swift. The feel of fur against her skin grounded her, the earthy scent calming the remnants of the previous day's turmoil. With a roar, she lunged, tearing into the dummy with a ferocity that surprised even her. Ronan nodded, a flicker of approval in his eyes. Strength is not enough. Control is paramount. He gestured for her to continue, and Ilara obeyed, practicing her strikes, her dodges, her defensive maneuvers. With each move, she felt the wolf within respond, honing her instincts, sharpening her reflexes. But it wasn't just about physical prowess. The training ground was a crucible, forging not only warriors but also bonds. As the days turned into weeks, Ilara found herself drawn to the younger wolves, those who had grown up under Vargan's rule, but still carried whispers of the old ways in their hearts. They watched her with a mixture of awe and curiosity, seeing in her a symbol of change, a bridge between the past and the future. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, a young girl named Mara approached Ilara. Mara was small for her age, with wide, innocent eyes that held a hint of sadness. She offered Ilara a small hand-picked bouquet of wildflowers. "These are for you," Mara said, her voice barely a whisper. "I saw you were hurt." Ilara accepted the flowers, touched by the girl's simple gesture of kindness. "Thank you, Mara. That's very thoughtful of you." Mara hesitated, then spoke, her voice gaining a bit of strength. "My mother, she told me stories about your pack, about how strong and brave they were." Ilara's heart clenched. "Your mother knew my pack." Mara nodded. "She said they fought for what was right, that they never gave up hope." Ilara looked at the girl, seeing a reflection of her own lost innocence in those wide eyes. "Your mother was right," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "We never gave up hope." From that moment on, a bond formed between Ilara and the younger wolves. They sought her out, eager to hear stories of the past, to learn from her experiences, to find strength in her resilience. They saw her not as the daughter of a fallen leader, but as a warrior, a survivor, a beacon of hope in a world shrouded in darkness. But even as she forged these new alliances, Ilara couldn't shake the memories of her father, of Vargan's betrayal, of the lies she had believed for so long. The training helped to numb the pain, to channel her anger into something productive, but it couldn't erase the past. Every time she saw Vargan, every time she heard his voice, the wound reopened, raw and bleeding. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling training session, Vargan approached her. He stood at the edge of the training circle, his expression unreadable. The scars on his face were stark reminders of the battle, of the price he had paid for his actions. "Ilara," he said, his voice low and rough, "I need to speak with you." Ilara hesitated, her instincts screaming at her to run, to lash out, to do anything but listen to him. But she knew she couldn't avoid him forever. So she nodded, her gaze unwavering. "What is it?" "Theron is planning another attack," Vargan said, his voice grim. "He's targeting the borderlands, the villages that are closest to your old territory." Ilara's breath caught in her throat. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I know you care about those people," Vargan said, his eyes searching hers. "And because I need your help." Ilara stared at him, her mind reeling. He needed her help? The man who had killed her father, who had destroyed her life, now needed her help. It was absurd, preposterous. And yet, she couldn't deny the truth in his words. She did care about those people. They were her people, her family, and if Theron attacked them, they would be defenseless. "What do you want me to do?" Ilara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Vargan stepped closer, his gaze intense. "I want you to help me defend them. I want you to use your knowledge of the land, your understanding of Theron's tactics, to help me protect those who cannot protect themselves." Ilara's heart pounded in her chest. It was a test, she knew, a test of her loyalty, her courage, her willingness to forgive. And as she looked into Vargan's eyes, she saw not the monster she had imagined, but a leader burdened by responsibility, driven by a desperate desire to protect his pack, even if it meant risking his own life. A long silence hung between them before Ilara responded. "I will do what I can to help, but don't mistake this for forgiveness." Dawn arrived with a messenger, a solitary figure astride a winded horse, emblazoned with Theron's standard, a wolf consumed by fiery tendrils. After a rigorous search that left him bristling, he was allowed into Silver Peak, every twitch observed by watchful warriors. Bram, ever vigilant, shadowed Ilara, suspicion etching lines around his eyes. "He carries discord in his wake, Ilara," he rumbled, just loud enough for her to hear. "Be on your guard." A palpable tension gripped the great hall as the messenger knelt before Vargan, his voice, though composed, betraying a nervous tremor. "Alpha Theron sends greetings and an offer of enduring accord." He unfurled a scroll of thick vellum, ostentatiously expensive. Its message, when he read it, reverberated through the vast space. "To Alpha Vargan of Silver Peak, Theron proposes an end to all strife, a permanent cessation of border incursions, and guaranteed safe passage. The condition is simple. The she-wolf Ilara, daughter of the late Reese of Oakhaven, delivered into Theron's hands within 3 sunrises." A collective intake of breath swept through the assembled wolves. A shiver traced Ilara's spine, a chilling premonition settling deep within her. She saw the initial shock morph into calculating appraisal in Vargan's gaze. every eye locked on him, the weight of their collective future a crushing burden. Vargan rose from his seat, his imposing figure eclipsing the messenger in shadow. When he spoke, his tone was deceptively mild. "And what assurance do we have that this amity isn't merely a smokescreen for further perfidy?" The messenger's Adam's apple bobbed. "Alpha Theron swears upon the crimson moon that Silver Peak and its people will remain untouched if Ilara is surrendered." "Swears on the blood moon," Vargan echoed, a sardonic edge to his voice. "A facile oath for a beast who revels in carnage." He paused, surveying his pack, their faces a canvas of anxiety and doubt. 3 days, you say?" The messenger nodded, eyes glued to the floor. 3 days to dictate the destiny of your people." As the messenger was escorted away, the great hall exploded with a clamor of voices. Some advocated for acceptance, murmuring of averted deaths. Others, driven by fierce loyalty, clamored for war. Ilara remained rooted in place, the weight of their fear almost suffocating. She was a pawn, forced into a game she never chose, her life a mere bargaining chip in a desperate gamble for peace. Later that night, Vargan sought out Ilara on the training grounds, the scent of turned earth and exertion hanging heavy in the air. She practiced her forms, her movements a blur of controlled fury, each strike a manifestation of suppressed rage. "Ilara," he began, his voice a low rumble. She didn't pause, her breath hitching in her chest. "What is it, Vargan? I need your thoughts." She finally stopped, turning to face him, her eyes burning with a mixture of wrath and apprehension. "My thoughts? I'm a currency. I'm worth less than a handful of calm days." Vargan stepped closer, his expression inscrutable. "That's not true." "Isn't it? Grant me honesty, Vargan. If surrendering me meant the salvation of your pack, would you yield?" His brief hesitation was her answer. A wave of bitter certainty washed over her. "I won't offer false comfort, Ilara," he conceded, his voice thick with weariness. "It's a choice no leader should ever face, but I pledge to safeguard my people, and that pledge extracts a heavy toll." "And what toll is that, Vargan? My life, my autonomy, my very worth?" Very worth?" She spat out the words, each syllable a poisoned dart. He reached for her, but she recoiled. "Don't. Do not touch me. You might have spared me once, but you'd expend me now." His hand fell, his shoulders losing their rigid set. "I require time, Ilara. Time to locate another path." "There exists no other path, Vargan," she stated, her voice devoid of emotion. "Farron wants me, and he will stop at nothing to obtain me." The following day, as twilight painted the sky, Vargan assembled the entire pack in the great hall. The atmosphere was charged, the silence broken only by the snap and hiss of the hearth fire. Ilara stood next to Bram, her heart hammering against her ribs. She understood what was coming. Vargan ascended the dais, his gaze encompassing the assembled wolves. He looked worn, the mantle of leadership weighing heavily on him. 3 days passed, he commenced, his voice resonating through the chamber. "We received overtures from Theron. He proposed peace at the price of Ilara." A restless murmur spread through the pack. Vargan raised a hand, silencing them. "I have considered his proposal. I have measured the lives of my people against the demands of our oppressor, and I have reached my conclusion." He paused, his gaze locking with Ilara's. "Theron covets Ilara, scion of Reese, former Alpha of Oakhaven, but he labors under a misapprehension." He straightened, his chest swelling with pride and resolve. "Ilara is more than merely the daughter of a departed Alpha. She is a warrior born. She is a soothing balm. She guards the vulnerable. And she is my Luna. A stunned silence gripped the hall before giving way to gasps. Ilara's eyes widened in disbelief. She stared at Vargon, her mind struggling to process his words. Vargon pressed on, his voice ringing with unwavering prey. Conviction. I will not yield her. I will not sacrifice her. I will stand with her against Theron and every force that menaces our pack. We will contest for our liberty. We will contend for our future. We will contend for Ilara. A thunderous roar erupted from the crowd, a wave of support and defiance engulfing Ilara. She met Vargon's gaze, her heart pounding in her chest. In that instant, the division between animosity and something deeper blurred. He had chosen her. He had chosen his pack. He had chosen war. The cost of tranquility had proven exorbitant. War had arrived. Whispers of doubt, the silence in the training yard hummed with unspoken tension. Ilara observed Vargon orchestrate his warriors in a display of ferocious grace. Every block, every lunge, echoed the fatal strike that had stolen her father. Hatred should have been simple, a direct line. Instead, a treacherous warmth unfurled in her core, nourished by fleeting eye contact and hushed pledges of tapala. Sanctuary. Later, she discovered Bram honing his blade near the stables. Bram, a word? She murmured, her voice barely audible against the rustle of hay. The air hung thick with the metallic tang of steel and the earthy perfume of the stable, a stark contrast to the chaos churning within her. He raised his head, his gaze, usually sharp and guarded, softening with concern. Ilara, what troubles you? She hesitated, grappling with how to voice the tempest inside. Vargon, he has claimed me as his Luna. Bram acknowledged the news with a slow nod. I'm aware. An audacious maneuver. One that grants you a measure of safety. For now. But at what cost? Her fingers worried the fabric of her gown. Is it genuine sanctuary, or merely a gilded cage? Bram sighed, deliberately sheathing his sword. My loyalty remains with you, always, Ilara. I witnessed your father's fall. The ache it lingers, a constant shadow. His voice was thick with suppressed emotion. I want to believe Vargon has altered, that he cherishes you. However, I also understand the potential for darkness within an Alpha, within any of us. You distrust him, she stated, matter-of-factly. Trust is hard-earned, not freely bestowed, especially on one burdened by such a history. He paused, his gaze intense. I've noticed the way he looks at you. There's something genuine there. But desire is blinding, Ilara. It can obscure true motives. A shiver tickled her spine. He claims regret that the war he acted under compulsion. Bram scoffed, a harsh sound. Compulsion? He was the Alpha, Ilara. The final judgment was his. Don't allow him to sanitize history to ease his conscience. Ilara's stomach tightened. Doubt, a venomous serpent, tightened its coils. He shielded me from Theron. He chose confrontation over surrendering me. Perhaps, or perhaps he perceived you as a prize, an emblem of his dominance. Theron's offer was a trial, Ilara. Vargon succeeded, but that doesn't absolve him. Bram closed the distance between them, his voice dropping to a hushed tone. Be cautious, Ilara. Observe him closely. Even affection can be a weapon in a wolf's grasp. His words struck her like icy darts, extinguishing the burgeoning warmth. What do you advise? Be resilient. Be vigilant. Listen to your instincts, Ilara. They have yet to fail you. And should you perceive even a flicker of that former darkness, be prepared to defend yourself. He rested a hand on her shoulder, his grip firm and reassuring. Remember your lineage, Ilara of Oakhaven. You are your father's daughter. His strength flows within you. She nodded, a knot constricting her throat. I will. But the promise felt flimsy, a fragile barrier against the gathering storm. That night, slumber eluded Ilara. She stole from her chambers and drifted through the moon-drenched corridors of Silver Peak. The cold stone walls offered no comfort, mirroring the frigidity consuming her. She discovered Vargun Kal in his study, engrossed in maps and scrolls. The hearth fire snapped, casting dancing shadows across his features, emphasizing the stern set of his jaw and the exhaustion etched around his eyes. He glanced up as she entered, his expression softening into concern. Ilara, what brings you here? You should be resting. I couldn't sleep, she confessed, her voice a mere thread. He rose and moved toward her, his presence dominating the space. Nightmares? She hesitated, then acquiesced with a nod. Of Oakhaven, of my father. He reached out, his hands gently framing her face. I realize it's inadequate, but I pledge to you, Ilara, I will exhaust every resource to safeguard you, to atone for the past. His words rang with sincerity, his eyes reflecting genuine regret. But Bram's cautions echoed in her mind. Even affection can be a weapon. Do you ever regret it? She asked, the question a heavy weight between them. His hold tightened imperceptibly. Regret? With every breath. The war, it irrevocably altered me. It deprived me of things I can never reclaim. And it stole your father. But you chose it, she pressed, needing absolute clarity, however brutal. He closed his eyes briefly, a tick pulsing in his jaw. I was convinced I acted to preserve my pack. I believed I was making the judicious decision. And now? He opened his eyes, his gaze locking onto hers. Now, I understand my error. Now, I have something to champion, something to defend above all else. She longed to believe him, desperately, but the whispers of doubt persisted, poisoning the tenuous trust beginning to bud between them. Had he genuinely reformed? Or was she simply a piece in a larger game, a trophy to be claimed, a symbol to be wielded? She recoiled from his touch, the warmth of his hands leaving an echoing chill. I require time, Vargun, she said, her voice wavering. Time to discern what I truly believe. He acquiesced with a slow nod, understanding evident in his gaze. I will grant you all the time necessary, Ilara. But understand this, my feelings for you are authentic. And I will exert every effort to earn your trust, to demonstrate I am worthy of your affections. She pivoted and fled the study, the weight of his words and Bram's warnings pressing down, threatening to drown her. The path ahead lay veiled in shadow, and she was lost as to which direction to turn. War unleashed a primal scream tore through the stillness. Unlike the familiar cadence of Silver Peak howls, this was a vicious, guttural sound that resonated deep within Ilara's very core. It was answered by another, then another, a crescendo of bloodlust shattering the night's delicate quiet. Lyra was instantly at her side, her face grim. They're here. The Blood Moon clan. The training field, once a haven, dissolved into pandemonium. Wolves shifted, their snarls echoing the fear clawing its way up Ilara's throat. A palpable tension filled the air, thick with the scent of pine and the promise of carnage. Vargan's arrival cut through the chaos. His gaze, usually holding a cryptic glimmer, was now glacial, unwavering. He moved with deadly precision, a predator poised to Baran. Safeguard his domain. Stay close, he rumbled, the directive meant for her alone. He didn't wait for acknowledgement before transforming into his wolf form a colossal obsidian shadow of raw power. He launched himself into the fray, a whirlwind of fang and claw. Ilara hesitated only an instant. She shifted, the familiar surge of energy flooding her system. A need to defend, a primal instinct she hadn't known she possessed, surged to the forefront, battling with her fear. She followed Vargan, senses amplified, every nerve alight. The forest floor transformed into a theater of war. The Blood Moon wolves were brutal, their attacks relentless. Ilara fought with surprising savagery, each blow fueled by years of pent-up fury and a desperate will to live. She evaded, parried, and retaliated, her world shrinking to the immediate threat. She spotted a young wolf, practically a whelp, trapped by two Blood Moon warriors. Reacting without thought, Ilara hurtled forward, knocking one aside and snapping at the other, creating an opening for the pup to flee. As it scrambled away, a small voice, laced with gratitude, breathed, "Thank you." The battle intensified. The air vibrated with snarls, yelps, and the sickening thud of bone against bone. Ilara fought as Vargan's shadow, a terrifying and strangely synchronized dance of survival. She watched him fell opponent after opponent, his power undeniable, his movements mercilessly effective. Yet, she also saw the toll it exacted, the weariness etching lines around his eyes, the grim set of his jaw. A Blood Moon warrior broke through their lines, targeting Ilara's vulnerable flank. Before she could react, Vargan intercepted, absorbing the strike himself. He stumbled, a low growl rumbling in his chest, but he held his ground, dispatching the attacker with swift finality. "Are you all right?" she asked, the concern in her voice catching her off guard. His eyes softened momentarily as he met her gaze. "I'm fine. Focus on surviving." Theron's proposition echoed in her mind, the offer of sanctuary in exchange for her capture. Was this his design? To weaken Silverpeak, to coerce them into surrendering her? The fighting gradually abated, the Blood Moon wolves melting back into the darkness. The victory felt hollow, the forest strewn with casualties. Exhaustion claimed Ilara, her muscles screaming in protest. The adrenaline receded, leaving a gnawing emptiness. Amongst the Silverpeak wolves tending to their wounded, Ilara saw a small figure approach. It was Mara, the young wolf who had offered her wildflowers just days prior. Her fur was caked in dirt and blood, her eyes wide with terror. "My mother," she whispered, her voice trembling. She didn't survive. Ilara's heart constricted. She remembered Mara's tales of her mother, of her gentleness and fortitude. Now, she was gone, another victim of this pointless conflict. "I'm so sorry," Ilara managed, her voice choked with emotion. Mara looked up at her, her eyes reflecting a grief that resonated with Ilara's own. "She told me stories about your pack," she said quietly. "About their strength, their loyalty. She said they would have wanted you to be safe." Her words pierced Ilara, a stark reminder of her losses, of the lives she had vowed to avenge. But looking at Mara, At the devastation etched on her young face, she questioned whether vengeance was truly the answer. Could it resurrect Mara's mother? Could it mend the wounds of war? Vargan approached, his expression inscrutable. He knelt beside Mara, his massive hand gently stroking her fur. "We will care for you, Mara," he said, his voice surprisingly tender. "You are one of us now." Ilara watched them, a storm of conflicting emotions churning within her. She witnessed the Alpha, the killer, the monster she had been taught to despise, displaying compassion towards a grieving child. She saw the leader, safeguarding his pack, even at great personal risk. And she perceived something deeper, something indefinable, something that challenged her preconceived notions about him. The war had unlocked something within her, a visceral, raw power, a fierce protective instinct, and a growing awareness that the boundaries between enemy and ally were far more indistinct than she had ever believed. The battle might be over, but the war, she knew, was far from resolved. And she remained caught in its web, bound to the very man she had sworn to destroy, her heart fractured between vengeance and a connection she couldn't deny. Luna's stand, east wall compromised. Lyra's strange shout knifed through Ilara's battlefield awareness. A glance confirmed Lyra's grim assessment. The Blood Moon horde was hammering the eastern fortifications of Silver Peak. Vargan, a blur of gray fur and snapping jaws, fought like a cornered god, yet the relentless assault threatened to overwhelm even his ferocity. Panic clawed at Ilara's throat, but she forced it back, drawing on her father's legacy years spent poring over military histories, absorbing the wisdom of strategists long gone. "Bram!" she yelled, her tone surprisingly firm amidst the chaos. 20 warriors. Reinforce the east wall, funnel them through the choke point, make them pay for every inch. Hesitation flickered in Bram's gaze as he looked from Ilara to Vargan, unspoken doubt hanging in the air. "Are you certain, Ilara?" "Trust me," she insisted, meeting his gaze. "This is our best chance." Understanding dawned in his eyes. For Silver Peak, he snapped orders, and a score of warriors detached from the main fray, vanishing into the gloom. Turning back to the swirling they lay, Ilara spied a fissure in the Blood Moon's offensive along the northern edge. "Vargan!" she bellowed, narrowly avoiding a lunging wolf. "They're stretched thin on the north. A counterpush could break their line." Surprise rippled across Vargan's face, quickly superseded by a flash of respect. With a thunderous roar, he signaled the Silver Peak warriors to surge forward, following Ilara's lead. She fought with a savage grace she hadn't known she possessed, her movements honed, her strikes precise. Years of pent-up fury, the lingering ache of loss, fueled each blow. The momentum shifted. Stunned by the sudden riposte, the Blood Moon wolves stumbled, their advance faltering under the renewed pressure. A fragile ember of hope flared in Ilara's soul. But the Blood Moon clan was not so easily deterred. Farron, eyes blazing with zealotry, forced his way to the front, his gaze locked on Vargan. He moved with startling speed, a veteran driven by a lifetime of animosity. He struck, catching Vargan unprepared, tearing a gash along Bealfa's side. A cry tore from Ilara's throat, her heart leaping with dread. She scrambled through the press of fighting wolves, desperate to reach Vargan, but Theron was too quick. He circled, a predator relishing his advantage. "This is for my kin, for the stolen lands," he spat, venom lacing his voice. "You will answer for your transgressions, Vargan." Vargan swayed, crimson staining his fur. He met Theron's stare, his own eyes hardening with a chilling fury. "You chose this path, Theron. You invited this bloodshed. Theron lunged again, aiming for the throat. Ilara hurled herself forward, deflecting Theron's assault, sending him reeling. She stood between them, heart hammering, instinctively reaching for the hidden dagger beneath her tunic. Ilara, Vargan growled, his voice thick with pain. Stand aside. He's mine. He murdered my father. She choked out, her voice trembling. I must do this. Theron chuckled, a harsh, grating sound. So, the little whelp seeks vengeance? You believe you can stand against me, pup? I offered you shelter, a place at my side. You chose poorly. She looked at Theron, truly saw him, and recognized not a monster, but a man broken by sorrow, warped by animosity. Mara's mother's words echoed in her mind. Could she condemn another to death? Perpetuate this unending cycle? Doubt flickered, a perilous moment of indecision. Vargan seized his chance. He unleashed a deafening roar that seemed to shake the very stones, and lunged at Theron with blinding speed. The two alphas collided, a tempest of claws and fangs, their contest a desperate ballet of destruction. Ilara watched, paralyzed, as Vargan finally gained the upper hand. He pinned Theron beneath him, fangs bared, eyes burning with savage triumph. This ends now, Vargan snarled, and with a swift, brutal movement ended Theron's life. An eerie hush fell over the battlefield. The fighting ground to a halt, the combatants on both sides frozen in stunned silence. The Blood Moon clan, their leader vanquished, their morale shattered, began a disorderly retreat, melting back into the darkness from whence they came. Vargan stood over Theron's lifeless body, chest heaving, blood dripping from his jaws. He turned to Ilara, his gaze filled with a weariness that pierced her soul. It's finished, he rasped, his voice ragged. Ilara stepped forward, reaching out to touch his face. Her fingers traced the strong line of his jaw, the sharp angle of his cheekbone. It's finally finished. Exhaustion crashed over her, but beneath it, a seed of hope began to sprout. She looked at the Silver Peak warriors, their faces lined with relief, their eyes shining with gratitude. We must sue for peace, she declared, her voice resonant and clear. We must break this chain of vengeance and forge a future where our packs can coexist in harmony. Vargan regarded her, initial surprise quickly yielding to a slow, knowing smile. He stepped forward, taking her hand in his. Silver Peak, he boomed, his voice echoing across the valley. We have fought with valor and endured great suffering, but today we choose a different destiny. Today we embrace peace. He turned to Ilara, his eyes reflecting an intensity of emotion that stole her breath. And I choose you, Ilara, to stand as my partner, to guide our pack into a new era. Ilara squeezed his hand, her heart overflowing with a love she never thought possible. Together, she affirmed, her voice ringing with conviction, we will construct a brighter tomorrow. Together, we will usher in a new dawn. Barely had the dust settled when Ilara began to direct the restoration. Silver Peak was scarred, not vanquished. Jagged remnants of timbers stabbed at the sky, and the acrid tang of burnt memories permeated the air. Yet, in this tableau of devastation, she perceived not just ruin, but a canvas for rebirth. Bram, she instructed, her voice raspy yet resolute. The east wall demands reinforcement. Double the sentries. Lyra, a comprehensive damage assessment. I need a full report within the hour. Beside her, Vargan's visage was a study in severity, a recent scar a stark line across his brow. He observed her, His gaze, usually a fortress of guardedness, now flickered with something akin to respect. "Resistance will be fierce," he growled, his voice gravelly from battle. Both packs harbor generations of animosity. Ilara's gaze met his, unwavering. "Then we rewrite their understanding. We unveil Silver Peak's potential. Our potential." Turning towards the small assembly of exhausted and uncertain faces, she declared, "Our work begins now. Each stone laid, each beam raised, will stand as a testament to our resolve. We are not merely rebuilding Silver Peak, but sculpting our future." The work was a brutal crucible. Days melted into weeks, an unending cycle of clearing wreckage, hauling lumber, and tending to the wounded. Ilara immersed herself, laboring alongside the pack until her hands were a map of blisters and abrasions. She was a constant presence, listening to their apprehensions, their anxieties, and their reservations. The Blood Moon pack, now integrated within Silver Peak, remained cautious, their eyes holding a residue of suspicion. The Silver Peak wolves, fiercely loyal to Vargan, shared a similar hesitation, their trust a precious, easily shattered commodity. "Whispers follow you," Anya murmured one evening as she dressed Ilara's wounds. "They brand you a Blood Moon spy, a harbinger of betrayal." Ilara exhaled, the weight of their distrust pressing down on her. "I am aware. Yet, they witness your tireless efforts. They see you tending to the injured, regardless of pack. Your strength shines through." A small, hopeful smile graced Anya's lips. "Give them time, Ilara. Time for wounds to mend. Time for trust to take root." Vargan, too, encountered resistance. His pack questioned his judgment, his decision to integrate a Blood Moon, offering her a place at his side. The memories of raids, bloodshed, and years of bitter conflict were still vivid. He addressed their concerns with quiet authority, reminding them of the exorbitant cost of perpetual war, the emptiness of vengeance. "We hold the power to forge a different future," he stated, his voice brimming with conviction. "A path of harmony, of unity. But courage is paramount. Trust is essential." Slowly, painstakingly, they began to gain ground. A new roof took shape, a wall rose anew, and tentative bonds were forged. The two packs, still guarded, began to collaborate, their shared labor a fragile bridge spanning years of enmity. Ilara and Vargan served as exemplars, their unity a guiding light in the encroaching darkness. Then approached the Luna ceremony, an age-old rite, a ritual designed to fortify the bond between the Alpha and his Luna, invoking the moon goddess's blessings upon their union and the pack. Ilara had uncovered its details in ancient scrolls, the very scrolls she'd once consulted in her quest to destroy Vargan. Now, she would stand beside him, not as a foe, but as a partner, his Luna. Bathed in an ethereal glow, she stood before the pack. Vargan's steady presence was a comforting warmth at her side. The elders chanted in unison, their ancient verses weaving a hypnotic spell. Ilara felt a cascade of emotions: trepidation, anticipation, and a profound sense of belonging. Vargan clasped her hand, an electric current coursing through her veins at his touch. His gaze met hers, reflecting her own hopes and anxieties. He squeezed her hand in silent reassurance. As the chanting crescendoed, the elders placed a silver circlet upon Ilara's brow, proclaiming her Luna of Silver Peak. Silence fell. "Do you, Ilara," the lead elder intoned, "accept the mantle of Luna, to shepherd and safeguard this pack, to stand steadfastly beside your Alpha in strength and in unity. Ilara surveyed Vargon, the faces of the pack, and the rebuilt walls of Silverpeak reaching for the sky. She thought of her father, of the vengeance that had consumed her for so long. A realization dawned. True strength resided not in annihilation, but in creation. Not in animosity, but in affection. "I do," she proclaimed, her voice resonant and clear, echoing through the night. A collective sigh of relief rippled through the pack. Vargon turned toward her. His eyes filled with an emotion she couldn't readily decipher. He lifted her hand to his lips, his touch tender, reverent. "And do you, Vargon," the elder continued, "accept Ilara as your Luna, to cherish and protect her, to guide this pack in tandem, with wisdom and with strength?" Vargon's gaze remained riveted on Ilara. "I do," he vowed, his voice a deep rumble that resonated within her very being. The ceremony culminated in a feast, a jubilant celebration of unity and hope. Ilara and Vargon sat shoulder to shoulder, personifying the new Silverpeak, a beacon amidst a world engulfed in shadow. Yet, even amidst the celebration, a seed of doubt lingered in Ilara's heart. Could she truly place her trust in Vargon? Could she ever completely absolve him for her father's demise? The journey to peace was arduous and protracted, and the phantoms of the past still cast long shadows. Forgiveness found Elder Rowan's face, a mask of carefully restrained distress, cut through the morning hush with a low, gravelly pronouncement. "Your father." Defending Silverpeak was not his sole motive, Ilara. He instigated the war. The word struck Ilara like a sucker punch, leaving her breathless. Vargon's hand clasped hers. A silent pledge of support she questioned her capacity to accept. Silverpeak's rebuilt ramparts seemed to press inward, and the nascent dawn adopted a somber hue. "Explain," she croaked, her voice threadbare. Rowan sighed, a gust laden with unvoiced burdens. "Before Vargon's ascent to Alpha, before the Blood Moon Pack possessed its current might, your father perceived an opportunity. He believed a preemptive strike, seizing their lands, would cement Silverpeak's dominance for generations. He manipulated border skirmishes, fanning the flames of conflict. He thirsted for power, Ilara, above all else, including peace." The revered image of her father, the paragon of selfless leadership, splintered. A grotesque caricature emerged, stained with avarice and aggression. "That's not possible," she whispered, denial a fragile shield. "It is the truth," Vargon affirmed, his tone flat. "I withheld this knowledge, Ilara, unwilling to tarnish your memory. But Rowan's words are not false." The ensuing silence was profound. Ilara wrenched her hand from Vargon's, a desperate need for distance surging within her from him, from Rowan, from the suffocating weight of this revelation. Her father, her idol, the man whose death she'd sworn to avenge, had been the instigator, the very foundation of her animosity. The driving impulse behind her actions was predicated on a falsehood. She whirled and fled, the relayed stones of Silverpeak blurring through a veil of tears. She ran until the forest's edge, where the trees stood as silent, disapproving witnesses. Collapsing against the gnarled bark of an ancient oak, she finally succumbed. Sobs tore through her, each a raw admission of her misplaced rage, her squandered vengeance. How had she been so blind? How had grief so warped her perception? Hours later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, splattering the sky with fiery hues, Ilara stood at her father's grave. The stark stone marker jutted from the unkempt earth, a silent epitaph to a life now irrevocably sullied. Kneeling, her fingers traced the chiseled letters. "Father," she breathed, her voice thick with unshed tears. I no longer know what to believe. Everything I held true about you, about the war, was a deceit. The wind whispered through the canopy, whisking her words away like fallen leaves. She closed her eyes, struggling to conjure the cherished image, the loving protector. But the vision fractured, overlaid with the ugly truth of his ambition, his violence. I condemned Vargan for robbing me of you, she confessed, her voice trembling. But now I grasp the truth. Perhaps not in its entirety, but enough to acknowledge you were no paragon. A lone tear meandered down her cheek, staining the cold stone. I absolve you, Father, she whispered, the words a liberation, a relinquishing of years of bitterness and resentment. I absolve you for your failures, for your hunger, for leaving me burdened by this. As the final slivers of sunlight vanished, draping the graveyard in long shadows, a sense of tentative peace descended upon Ilara. Not a complete healing, but a genesis. A hesitant stride forward on the arduous path toward forgiveness, not only for her father, but for herself. She returned to the pack house, the air thick with the scent of resin and embers. Vargan awaited her, his gaze etched with concern. He offered no words, no empty reassurances, only his outstretched hand. And this time, she accepted it. Later, as they lay entwined in bed, the atmosphere between them was altered. No longer the strained, wary quiet of mistrust, but a comfortable stillness born of shared understanding. Rowan imparted something else, Vargan murmured, shattering the silence. Ilara turned towards him, her pulse quickening. What is it? He reached for her hand, placing it gently upon her abdomen. We are expecting a child, Ilara. The world seemed to lose its equilibrium. A child? That child, a symbol of their improbable union, a testament to the delicate truce they had forged. Tears sprang to her eyes, this time fueled by joy, by hope. A novel life, a fresh commencement, a chance to cultivate a future devoid of the darkness that had shadowed their past. Are you certain? She breathed, her voice catching. Vargan nodded, a rare smile playing on his lips. Rowan confirmed it. She said the mating bond is growing stronger, preparing you. Ilara covered his hand with her own, savoring the warmth of his touch, the steadfastness of his affection. In that instant, all her misgivings, all her terrors, receded. She gazed into his eyes, no longer seeing the monster she had once perceived, but the man she had grown to cherish, the father of her child, the alpha of her pack. I'm afraid, she admitted, her voice barely audible. I know, he responded, his grip tightening reassuringly. But we shall confront it together, always. As she slipped into sleep, cradled in Vargan's arms, Ilara surrendered to a dream of a future in which her child could flourish in harmony, untouched by the animosity and brutality that had tainted their history. A future where the Silver Peak and Blood Moon packs could stand shoulder to shoulder, unified in strength and devotion. A future where love could truly triumph. A legacy of hope. Ilara's hand instinctively settled on her abdomen, a tender, almost unaware caress. The burgeoning life within felt like a dream, a fragile bloom amidst fields of ashen memories. Only weeks prior, a thirst for retribution had been her sole guide, an unyielding directive etched onto her soul. But that directive had fractured, reshaped by the warmth of unexpected affection and the burden of newly unearthed truths. The revered father she'd idolized was a man riddled with flaws, a key architect of the very conflict that had shaped her world. The revelation had been a brutal reckoning, collapsing the foundations of everything she held dear. Yet, from the ruins, something resilient had sprung forth. Forgiveness, not merely for the man who'd sired her, but for herself, for the years devoured by bitterness, the blinding fury that had threatened to consume her utterly. She had teetered on the precipice of darkness, nearly becoming the monster she abhorred. A wave of nausea, a familiar herald of her condition, swept over her. Eyes shut, she drew a deep breath, anchoring herself to the comforting presence of Vaughan beside her. Once her sworn adversary, a figure of childhood terror, he was now her bedrock, a steadying force amid the chaos, the father of her child. A cruel twist of fate, perhaps, yet also a vibrant thread in life's intricate and often unforgiving tapestry. Opening her eyes, she refocused on the present moment. Vaughan sat beside her on the weathered wooden bench overlooking the Silver Peak Valley, his gaze lost to the horizon. His broad frame was relaxed, though a subtle tightness remained in his jaw, an echo of the Alpha he'd been, a warrior sculpted by bloodshed. He had borne the weight of his heritage, the chains of his history, with unwavering stoicism. Yet beneath that hardened shell, she'd glimpsed a tender spirit, a profound longing for tranquility, for absolution. "What occupies your thoughts?" she murmured, breaking the stillness. He turned, his stormy sea-colored eyes softening as they met hers. How different things might have unfolded. His voice was husky, imbued with a lament that echoed her own. "Might have or ought to have?" Ilara countered, a spark of challenge flickering in her tone. Vaughan exhaled, raking a hand through his raven hair. "Likely both. My father, his choices became my inheritance." "And you chose to rewrite that legacy," Ilara affirmed, conviction ringing in her voice. "You chose peace." He sought her hand, his calloused fingers entwining with hers. "Because of you. You illuminated a different path." Ilara leaned into his touch, drawing strength from his presence. "We both did. We both needed to relinquish the past to envision a future." Silence settled between them, a comfortable expanse punctuated by unspoken understanding. Ilara contemplated the future, the gauntlet of challenges that lay ahead, integrating disparate societies, mending old wounds, nurturing a child in a world still scarred by strife. It would be arduous. There would be opposition, setbacks, moments of wavering resolve. But they would confront them together, as a unified force, bound not solely by the mating bond, but by a shared aspiration for a brighter tomorrow. "Vaughan," she began, her voice barely audible, "do you ever find yourself regretting it, regretting the act of killing my father?" He tightened his grip on her hand, his gaze unwavering. "Every single day. Not solely because he was your parent, but because I extinguished a life. Those were brutal times, Ilara. Survival demanded a certain ruthlessness. But that doesn't excuse the act itself." He paused, his tone thick with emotion. "Knowing what I now know, knowing you, I would have sought an alternative." Ilara nodded, tears pricking her eyes. "It wasn't a pardon, but an acknowledgement, a readiness to shoulder the burden of his actions." "Thank you," she whispered. Vaughan framed her face with his hands, his thumbs gently sweeping away the tears. "There's more," he said softly, a trace of hesitancy in his voice. Ilara frowned, scrutinizing his expression. "What is it?" He drew a deep breath. "The healers, they've confirmed it. You're expecting twins." Ilara gasped, her hand flying to her stomach. Twins. A double measure of hope blossoming within her, a legacy amplified. Overwhelmed, she began to weep. "Are you all right?" Vaughan asked, his brow furrowed in concern. "Yes," she choked out, a watery smile playing on her lips. "I'm just overwhelmed. It's a great deal to absorb." Vaughan drew her close, enveloping her in his embrace. "We'll absorb it together," he murmured, his voice a comforting warmth against her ear. "We'll confront everything together." As the first tendrils of dawn painted the sky with shades of apricot and rose, Ilara and Vaughan stood hand in hand, observing the sunrise over Silver Peak. The valley below was bathed in an ethereal glow, a symbol of the fresh start they were building. The past would forever be a part of them, a shadow lingering at the edges of their hearts, but it would not control them. They would learn from it, evolve from it, and harness it to construct a future where love triumphs over animosity, where serenity reigns over conflict. Their love story, conceived in vengeance and forged in the crucible of conflict, had flourished into a legacy of hope, a beacon for generations yet to come. Our dawn never fades. Years had spun gossamer through Ilara's dark braids, painting silver filigree near her temples, each strand a silent chronicle of laughter shared, tears shed, and a transcendent love. Beside Vaughan, she occupied their porch swing, a haven forged not in bloodlust, but in compromise, rooted in shared aspirations and painstakingly constructed accord. The vibrant energy of their progeny, grandchildren now, vibrated in the air as they darted across the verdant expanse that once echoed with war cries. Vaughan's hand, a roadmap of wrinkles and battle scars, covered hers. His clasp, weakened by time, retained a familiar reassurance, a silent vow sustained through decades. His gaze followed the children, lines fanning from his eyes, as a gentle smile played on his lips. In a previous life, such a sight would have been an impossibility, a cruel jest whispered by malicious spirits. Today, it was their reality, forged from a staunch rejection of defining animosity. "Spirited," Vaughan rumbled, his voice textured with age, reminiscent of their mother. Ilara's chuckle resonated, a mellow sound that enveloped them. "And stubborn as their father." He squeezed her hand, his gaze meeting hers. In the depths of those time-worn eyes, Ilara saw a kaleidoscope of memories, of conflicts endured and victories earned, of a love discovered and nurtured, of forgiveness both given and received. Regret lingered, a subtle shadow etched within the creases, an ever-present reminder of the pain inflicted, the lives extinguished. Yet, above all, shone an enduring love, a devotion that had withstood every tempest, every trial, every doubt. "Do you recall?" Ilara began, softly, her voice barely audible. "That first encounter? The raw animosity it breathed between us." Vaughan nodded, his gaze returning to the playing children. "I do. The inferno in your eyes, the burning thirst for retribution. It possessed me," Ilara confessed. "It was all that remained. And yet," Vaughan tilted his head, his eyes locking with hers once more, "you chose to release it. You embraced affection. You chose us." Ilara's heart surged with a love that had deepened and matured with each passing season. Not the incandescent fervor of their youth, but something richer, more profound. A love crafted from unwavering trust, profound understanding, and a shared dedication to a future unburdened by the specters of the past. The sun dipped below the horizon, imbuing the firmament with shades of coral, rose, and amethyst. The children, their boundless energy spent, coalesced around them, their small hands reaching for connection. Ilara drew them close, inhaling the comforting double-O fragrance of their hair, feeling the vibrant warmth of their small bodies. They were the future incarnate, the living embodiment of their legacy, vibrant testament to the transformative power of clemency and the perennial resilience of love. As twilight's curtain descended, Vargan's respiration became shallow and uneven. His grasp on Ilara's hand relaxed, his eyes closing into peaceful slumber. A hush settled over the porch, the joyful uproar replaced by reverent quietude. Ilara recognized the inevitable. She had anticipated this moment. She leaned near Vargan, her lips grazing his ear. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "For everything, for the love, for the children, for the peace." A faint smile flickered across Vargan's lips. He opened his eyes, a sliver, his gaze finding hers one last time. Serenity radiated from him, a tranquil acceptance of what was to come. "Ilara," he breathed, his voice a mere sigh. "My Luna, my everything." And then with a final, gentle boy, exhalation, he was gone. A single tear streamed down Ilara's weathered cheek, a mixture of sorrow, love, and profound gratitude. She closed her eyes, allowing herself a moment of despair, to mourn the departure of her beloved. But even amidst her grief, there was unwavering conviction, a deep-seated assurance that their love would prevail, that their legacy would live on through their descendants. She opened her eyes, her gaze encompassing her family, their faces etched with anguish, yet marked also with quiet fortitude, a resilience mirroring her own. She understood that pain would diminish, that the memories would remain, and that their love would eternally bind them, generation upon generation. As the first stars twinkled into existence in the darkening expanse above, Ilara leaned down and gently kissed Vargan's brow. "Our dawn never sets," she whispered, her voice brimming with affection and hope. "It simply metamorphoses into a new form of illumination." Their saga was far from complete. It was interwoven into the very essence of their clan, a beacon shining brightly for a future where amity triumphed over enmity, where serenity reigned supreme, and where the chronicle of two improbable lovers would endure for all eternity.